Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Dr. Ryan Gottfredson. Ryan is a mental success coach and cutting-edge leadership consultant, author, trainer, and researcher. He helps improve organizations, leaders, teams, and employees by improving their mindsets and mindfulness. Ryan is currently a leadership and management professor at the Mihaylo College of Business and Economics at Cal State Fullerton in California. He holds a Ph.D. in organizational behavior and human resources from Indiana University and a B.A. from Brigham Young University. Ryan is joining us on the Success Insight podcast today to chat about his new book, Success Mindsets: Your Keys to Unlocking Greater Success in Your Life, Work, and Leadership. Ryan, welcome to the Success Insight podcast.
Yes, thanks for having me on, Howard. Been looking forward to this.
Fantastic. I have to say, this introduction, and as I was prepping it and reading about the book, you hit on some of the key words that I just love: success, mindset, leadership, and unlocking our full potential. And it's really, again, I feel very fortunate that we have this introduction and now we get to learn a little bit more about you and your work. If you wouldn't mind, just give us a little bit of the backstory of who you are and what led you to doing the work that you're doing.
It's always great talking to a junkie like yourself. Sounds like you're a junkie like me. So I came at this from two different perspectives, and I'll give you both. One is from a personal perspective, and that from this perspective, I've always been kind of a self-help devourer of information. In fact, my senior year of high school, my favorite class was a sports psychology class, and that's when I read some books by Stephen R. Covey, 7 Habits, and I just ate it up. And I've always been about becoming better, wanting to be a better person. And to be quite honest with you, I worked really hard. I feel like I've worked really hard at trying to become the best version of myself. But it's been a really painful process. I feel like I'm working harder than I am making progress, or that's how I felt historically. So that's on one level. The other level is I did my Ph.D. at Indiana University, and my dissertation was on leadership. And what I've learned about the last 70 years of leadership research is that the majority of that research is focused on behaviors. So what do leaders need to do to be effective? But to me, leadership is more than just doing, it's about being. And so for the last 6 years, I've been trying to tap into this being element of leadership. And what I've learned along this journey is that on a personal level, the reason why my personal development efforts were so frustrating is because I wasn't focused on the most foundational element of myself, and that's my mindsets. And that's where I've come to focus on for this being element of leadership, because our mindsets are just that. They're the most foundational element about ourselves. As I've added mindsets to my personal development equation, that's when I've started to see my personal development really take off and my efforts start to return some investments.
Fantastic. And when you were going through this aha moment, these insights, so to speak, was there some architects of thought, idea makers, coaches, guides? Who did you kind of latch onto and said, here's the key. And now that I know there's a door, there's a key, I'm going to start to unlock it and make this mine?
Yeah, such a great question, because I think that there's a lot out there, right? And I think everybody who has put out information out there has been really well intended. But I think the fact of the matter is there's a lot of fluff out there. And I think particularly in the field of mindsets, there's a lot of fluff. In fact, when I first started to learn about the power of mindsets, I literally Googled, what mindsets do I need to have to be successful? And almost all of the hits that popped up actually didn't even talk about mindsets. They talked about different behaviors. And so at that point in time, I was like, okay, let me do something that a good academic would do, is let's go to the academic research. And what I found is across psychology, marketing, management, and education, mindsets have been studied for 30 plus years. And they've been studied in relative isolation from each other. And what I found is that there's 4 different sets of mindsets that have received the most attention And all I've done with my work is I've tried to bring substance to this mindset field by just pulling together these sets of mindsets that we know through 30 plus years of research drive success. That's essentially what I've done is I've compiled this framework of mindsets. And that's what my book, Success Mindsets, is all about. And I consider it to be the most comprehensive and research-backed book on mindsets to date.
I have to say, as you were kind of describing that and bringing this data together, you reminded me of Brené Brown. And I know you referenced her in PR file that I was sent. And because she's all about the data. What does the data say? And as someone who is I have a master's degree and I've reached a point, it's like I'm done with school. But I'm very much into the scholar practitioner orientation. I want to know what the data is, what are the disciplines. And so I truly appreciate, the direction you've taken. Now I have a question. As I was reading the notes to prepare for our conversation, I was reading, and I'm going to quote, this was given to me. So if it's wrong, you have somebody else to take this to task.
No, it's all good.
It says in the first paragraph, all managers and executives want to lead their people successfully, to inspire more teamwork, greater creativity, and higher productivity. And then it goes on to discuss your new book, Success Mindsets, your keys to unlocking greater success in your life, work, and leadership. The very next paragraph says, the most common organizational problems, says author Ryan Gottfredson, revolve around poor leadership and management, low employee morale, a lack of inclusion, and inability to effectively initiate and navigate change. All of that can change when an organization's leadership recognizes its needs a change in its mindset. So, before we go on, those seem like a paradox. I hear you saying managers and executives want to lead, but then there's this inability to lead.
Yes. So when I go and I do trainings with organizational leaders, one of the questions I generally ask is, are you trying the best that you can? And I get everybody's hand always goes up. All leaders are trying the best that they can. But let me give you some statistics, which will probably shock you.
Okay.
One is 60% of employees say that their direct manager damages their self-esteem. 65% of employees say that they would prefer to have a new boss compared to more pay. And 75% of employees say that their boss or manager is the worst and most stressful part of their job. And so we've got this. This is why it's so important that we dive into mindsets, because once we dive into mindsets, we're enhancing our self-awareness. So the disconnect here is that leaders have incredibly good intentions, but oftentimes have very low self-awareness. Let me give you an example that plays this out. Is that okay?
That's perfect.
All right. So the example is Tom Coughlin. He's the former head coach of the New York Giants. And he was a pretty successful head coach. He won 2 Super Bowls when he was with the New York Giants. And then he took a job as president of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the Jacksonville Jaguars have historically been a really poor football team. And so I think we've got to believe that when he made this transition, he was thinking, I want to turn around the Jacksonville Jaguars. I want to improve what they've been doing, and I want to leave a lasting legacy for myself. He was with the Jacksonville Jaguars for 2.5 years up until this last football season. And in the middle of this last football season, the NFL Players Association came out with a report. And it said that while the Jacksonville Jaguars, the players, represent 3% of the NFL, because there's 32 teams, 25% of player complaints came from the Jacksonville Jaguars. So 3% of the population is driving 25% of the complaints. And they essentially said in this report that all of these complaints stemmed back to Tom Coughlin and the policies and procedures that he had implemented. And they went on to say that we cannot recommend that any NFL player plays for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Wow.
Promptly, Tom Coughlin gets fired, kind of rightfully so, by the owner. But here's the situation where Tom Coughlin's coming in saying, I want to do the best that I can. And then he engaged in practices and behaviors that ends up making the organization even worse than what he started. If we were to dive into this, it's all going to be rooted in Tom Coughlin's mindsets and associated fears and insecurities with some of the negative mindsets that I'm sure that he had. And until a leader can uncover some of that, It's going to be really hard for them to have their intentions match their actual outcomes and results.
All right, I've got a question now. Tom Coughlin, like you said, won 2 Super Bowls. What was different about Tom Coughlin at the New York Giants versus Tom Coughlin, Jacksonville Jaguars? What was it? Did he change suddenly? Did his mindset change because he had this target that he wanted to hit? I want to turn these guys around. Or was it a combination? He didn't have the same kind of players. I mean, I get the story, but I am curious about how do you go from being the super successful to crash and burn?
Great question. And to be honest, I don't know, but here's some factors that I could see going on here. So when you're the head coach of a football team, while you have a lot of authority, you also are limited by the organization's culture itself, or you are affected by that, and the players are affected by that. And so one of the things that we got to keep in mind is Tom Coughlin, he's kind of known to be a disciplinarian, which suggests that he probably is a person that really likes to be in control, and he fears being out of control. And if he had the ability to kind of have overall control, he would have that. But as a head coach, you are somewhat limited. So I think that was going on. So when he stepped into the Jacksonville Jaguars, he had complete control. And so he may have overstepped his bounds that the New York Giants culture wouldn't have allowed. Another factor is that as Tom Coughlin has gotten older in his career, the players themselves have always stayed about the same age, right? In their 20s and early 30s for the most part. And so as he gets older, his management style, if he keeps it the same, is probably going to increasingly become less and less effective because he's not changing to meet the current players' demands. And I think that to a certain degree, and what I know about the New York Giants is they had some tenured leaders with the New York Giants, like Eli Manning is one of those leaders. And when you go to the Jacksonville Jaguars, which is historically a younger team with less strong leaders, then those leaders, if he's not willing to adapt to these younger players without a good leadership structure, then they may take his actions in the wrong way or different than what he intended. And so what we're kind of seeing is we know a lot of research about millennials, and they struggle with the disciplinarian and authoritative leadership styles, which it seemed like he had. And so that's part of it. He wasn't willing to adapt himself, it seems like.
Well, I was wondering when the word millennial was going to come up. And I also appreciated, 2 things. First, Ryan, for dancing in the moment, because that's what it was. You were dancing in the moment to that question. I just didn't get it. And it raises another question, and I know we're eventually going to get to the book in more detail. We want to get to that. This idea of culture and mindset, and how does that affect these organizations and these leaders that are still struggling to work on the success mindset? How does the organization affect their ability to go from the closed mindset over to the open mindset? Yeah,
we'll talk about this at a really high level. Let me give you 4 different desires, and you tell me if these are common or not common desires for leaders in organizations. So the desires are a desire to look good, a desire to be right, a desire to avoid problems, and a desire to get ahead. Would you say that those are common desires?
Very much so.
Right? And it makes sense because at least on one level, who wants to look bad, be wrong, have problems, and get passed up? Well, nobody, and especially leaders. And because there's a lot of social pressure about our appearance, how we look, to the degree to which we have the answers, to the degree to which we aren't having problems, right? But what is important to understand is while these desires are justified, we need to look at where is the focus of these desires. They're self-focused. So when leaders have these desires, they're primarily focused on their success and not on the success of the organization or on the people that they lead. In fact, these 4 desires are associated with the 4 negative mindsets that I focus on. And what we just don't understand is when we have these desires, we're in self-protection mode, but there's more positive desires to have that are associated with the more positive mindsets. And as we make that shift, we move into organization advance mode. So at a high level, instead of having a desire to look good, we should have a desire to learn and grow, which may mean wading through problems and failure. Instead of having a desire to be right, we have a desire to find truth and think optimally, which may mean that we have to admit that we're wrong at times. Instead of a desire to avoid problems, we should have a desire to reach goals. And instead of a desire to get ahead, we should have a desire to lift others. And so often when I'm working with organizations, leaders have these self-focused desires and they don't see anything wrong with it because they're easy to justify. But what ends up happening is when they have these desires, they're blind to the impact that they're having on others. And that if we can awaken them to this, we could shift them over to the more positive desires, they're going to be more effective. But to get to your question, which is about culture, is culture dictates what desires leaders are going to have. If it is a competitive environment, leaders are naturally going to take on the self-focused desires. If this is a psychologically safe environment, a collaborative environment, leaders are going to be much more inclined to take on those more positive desires and mindsets. So at the end of the day, our mindsets are based upon two factors: what we bring to the table from our life experience and the current culture of the organization. And so those are the two primary factors. So I love that you brought up the idea of culture because it is really important in shaping leaders and employees' mindsets.
Very good. Now, with the book, Success Mindsets, Your Key to Unlocking Greater Success in Your Life, Work, and Leadership, how did this book come about for you? Clearly, you have the scholarly background, the scholar practitioner. You are a practitioner, working with Gallup, et cetera. You've got a love of gathering the data and analyzing it. What is it telling us? Who are going to be the consumers of this book? And then how are they going to start to use it to change that mindset, and even change the culture in the organization?
Yeah, I see two primary audiences for this book. One is those leaders and organizational leaders and HR people that want to stay on the cutting edge of personal and organizational development. These are people that want to have the biggest bang for their buck in terms of their development efforts. And if they want that to happen, they've got to focus on mindsets because, again, mindsets are foundational to everything that we do. They are the mental lenses that we wear that shape how we think, learn, and behave. And if we can improve people's mental lenses, we'll improve how they think, learn, and behave. And so that's one audience, is those that really want to be at the cutting edge, because there's not too many people that are talking about mindsets in organizations. The second audience for this book is a little bit more about where I came from, where maybe you feel like you're a stalled professional. So you're probably educated, you have big dreams for success, you're probably driving around your city and you're thinking, I am so much more capable than that person, but that person's driving around a Ferrari and I'm stuck with my Nissan Altima or whatever it might be. And so these are people that they know that they're capable of more than what they currently have, and they're not sure why they haven't been able to get over the hump. They've been busting their butt off, and what they just don't see, and this is where I was, and what I didn't see at the time was, while I was busting my butt off, trying to improve, trying to get better, the thing that I kept overlooking was my mindsets. It was my mindsets that were holding me back. And at the time, when I was going through, as you mentioned, I was working at Gallup, which was a great experience, but it was a negative experience for me because I kind of felt pigeonholed in a position that I felt like I was beyond. And in the moment, I was blaming everybody else for my problems. But what I really need to realize is that the root of my problems was me. And I needed to make shifts in my mindsets. And as I've done that, I've been able to see, I wouldn't have written my book if that hadn't been the case. And in fact, the book just hit the Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller list this last week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So it's been a really cool journey since I've started to focus on mindset. I feel like I've been taking leaps in terms of my personal development and success, whereas before I just felt like I was crawling along like a snail.
Very good. And how does your ideal audience begin to take this information and to develop their mindsets so that they're figuring out which ones they need to work on? Or do you have to work on all four of them? Or is there one that's more important than the other? And then how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, great question. So one of the tools that I've developed is a personal mindset assessment, and I've got it for free on my website, which is ryangottfredson.com. And it's only 20 questions, so it takes you about 5 minutes to take. And then it'll give you your scores and results on the 4 different mindset sets that I focus on. And you'll be able to compare the quality of your current mindsets compared to 10,000 plus other people who have taken the assessment. The assessment itself will help you identify where you currently are. It'll also help you identify where you need to go. And so this is the first step in shifting our mindsets. We've got to put labels to these mindsets, and we've got to understand them, because if we don't do that, then we don't have any ability to introspect about them ourselves, because we just have a tendency to think that how we see the world is the best way to see the world. And we need a tool like this to just help us step back from ourselves and evaluate our current mental lenses. So that's the first step, just kind of getting labels for this. Then the second step is we've just got to practice. We got to engage in some small interventions on a regular basis. And as we do that, we'll shift to more of the positive mindset. So as a whole, this isn't too different than learning how to count to 10 in a different language. First step is we got to put words associated with the numbers. We got to put labels to this. And then second, we just need to practice it. So we need interventions that activate our positive mindsets. And the cool thing is that research has found that even watching a 3-minute video can shift and improve your mindsets for up to 2 weeks. Now, if we can stack interventions on top of each other, these shifts become more permanent.
Very good. And with the practice and the small interventions, and in the spirit of full disclosures, folks, I mean, there's a lot of upfront work that goes into preparing for the podcast. So I was on Ryan's website, and I did notice, because I do notice these things, there was a little app there, which is that the tool that you're using? Is because I love the fact that every day I can do an acknowledgement to happiness. I mean, one of our guests, Sherry Ruth, she had 50 affirmations. Every day you're saying something to affirm what you want to receive out of the day. So with this app, is that then designed to provide that little insight, that little moment of exercise the muscle of learning about changes in mindset? Is that what's going on a daily basis?
Yes. So what you're talking about is what created a digital mindset coach. And it's an app you could either use on a phone or else you could get it via email. And what it is about every other day, 3 days a week, you'll get 3 questions that you're prompted with. And what these are designed to be are these little exercises that'll do 4 things is what we're finding. Is 1, it will help us shift our mindsets. 2, it'll help us deepen our self-awareness. And by doing so, that'll help us make us more intentional. And then the 4th thing is that'll help us retain the things that we might be learning in the webinars that I do on mindsets or the book that I've written. The idea is that if you read my book, and I don't know of any other book that has this, that I don't know about you, I read lots of books. Well, 6 months later, I can't remember it. So part of this app is developed to help us retain the knowledge that we learn when we read. So on every other day, you're prompted to answer 3 questions. And these could be just questions about the content. They can be a short video that you watch and then you ask a question. The video is designed to activate these positive mindset neuroconnections. Or there's a short journaling exercise that you do. And so between these 3 things is on a regular basis, we're just activating the more positive mindsets. We're shifting those more to the positive side. And then we're also helping people retain the knowledge associated with these different mindsets. And as they do this, they're improving their capability of standing apart from themselves and evaluating their mindsets on a day-to-day basis, which is then making them more intentional about how they operate. And so it's been really cool to see people go through this program, because in the course of 3 or 4 months, which is about how long this coach lasts, we're seeing rather significant shifts in people's mindsets. And we're seeing them feeling like they're a much more self-aware and capable person of navigating kind of the tricky situations that we might encounter.
I love it. I love it. You alluded to, the 3 months and people providing their feedback. What are you hearing about the book and the information from it, the app, the lessons, and what are your clients, let's call them clients, what are they saying?
Yeah, it's really been overwhelming, particularly this last week as we ran this marketing campaign to put us on the Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller list. And I've started to get all the feedback that is coming in from that. And people are writing in. In fact, I got an email this morning from a guy who said, this has been mind-blowing. He says, I always considered myself to be open-minded. Come to find out after reading your book, I'm closed-minded. And now I could do something about it. One of my motives in writing this book is I wanted it to be one of the deepest introspective dives that people would do. And it's proving to be that way in the feedback that I'm getting, that people are awakening to themselves at a level that they've never been able to. Because for the most part, our mindsets are something that we're not conscious of. And so by reading the book, we're now making the unconscious conscious. And that's proven to be very powerful for these folks. And so it's been really fun seeing these messages come in.
Fantastic. As you have been on this journey from undergraduate to graduate, I mean, it's not a walk in the park. You know, your family, friends, they don't see you for a couple of years. And now that you are, your faculty, you're authoring these books, you've got this entrepreneurial trajectory going on. What are you learning about yourself? What's changed for you?
Yeah, great question. I think one of the things that I'm learning more and more, and I think everybody's learning it right now going through this COVID-19 crisis, is that what will make us successful, whether as a person or as an organization, what will make us successful 5, 10, 20 years from now is our ability to be agile, to be able to shift to meet the current market demands or even the future market demands. And that means that we can't stay stagnant. I think a lot of people, and I was there at one point in time where you kind of become an adult. You don't want to do things for the first time anymore, right? Because we've kind of been through it. It's not very comfortable to do things for the first time. But if we could develop and strengthen that muscle of doing things for the first time, it doesn't seem as scary to us. And that's going to be a skill that we're going to need to have to be successful 5, 10, 20 years from now. So for me, I've been learning more and more of that importance. And for me, that means that I need to be continually trying new things, doing new things, pushing the limits, knowing that some of those things aren't going to work out, but I'm going to learn a lot through the process and I'm going to be able to better position myself in the future. And so at the end of the day, the thing that I'm learning is the critical importance of agility. And that's needed now more than ever.
And even inside organizations too, is being able to quickly adapt, be agile. And I think, again, getting back to culture, an organization that embraces that as well. So a mistake is an opportunity to learn. It's not an opportunity to say, you're out of here. What's next for you?
Well, I'm currently creating an online course to go with this book. I believe it's going to be maybe the most personal transformation course that you could find because we are getting at our mindset level, the most foundational level about ourselves. And I've got an exercise that I've now started to use with my clients, and they are saying it's the most transformational thing that they've ever done. So the online course will be a big thing. I'm really excited about that. And then I'm chomping on the bit to do book 2. Success Mindsets I really wrote it 2 years ago. It's about a 2-year journey to bring a book to light. And I have learned a lot in the last 2 years. And I can't wait to bring these new learnings to light in a new book. So I've already got kind of the ideas. I've got to make the outline, but book number 2 is right around the corner.
Fantastic. And on that note, Ryan, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
Yeah, number one best place is my website, ryangottfredson.com. There they could take that personal mindset assessment. They could get access to my book via any major retailer. But if they go through my website, then I have a bunch of freebies associated with it. So for example, if you buy the print version, I'll give you the audiobook for free. And then you could also learn about the digital mindset coach there. So that's surely the best place to go. Perhaps the second best place to go is LinkedIn, and would love to connect with you there.
Fantastic. And we'll most certainly provide the links back to the website, LinkedIn, and to the major, booksellers as well. But, for our listeners, do go out, take advantage of Ryan's website, the free assessment, And, if you buy the book there, he's got some great add-ons to support your journey in developing the mindset. Ryan, it's been an absolute pleasure to hear about your work, learn about you and what has been driving you and your journey of kind of looking at your mindset and the great things that have come out as a result of that. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I think for a little bit, at least a little bit, this is therapy for me. I think I've needed this mindset work as much as anybody. And that's probably one of the reasons why I focus on it, but focus on mindset sooner than what I did. And I think that they'll find if they do so, that they'll more quickly unlock the success that they're seeking.
Fantastic. And again, in the spirit of full disclosure, it is not lost as I look back on my journey of I wish I had a better view and was tuned into my mindsets. One of the books you had referenced in the materials that were forwarded was the Arbinger Institute, the Leadership and Self-Deception. And once I saw that, it brought back this entire flood of recall. And then Brene Brown's book, of course, she's one of my favorite writers. So thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Success Insight podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Howard. Really appreciate it.
Fantastic. All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Dr. Ryan Gottfredson. Ryan is a mental success coach and definitely cutting edge, leadership consultant, author, trainer, and researcher. And he helps improve organizations, leaders, teams, and employees by improving their mindsets and mindfulness. And we have just been chatting about Ryan's journey as well as learning more about this body of work that went into essentially the work he's doing and in the creation of his latest book, Success Mindsets, Your Keys to Unlocking Greater Success in Your Life, Work, and Leadership. Do go out to Ryan's website, and it's ryangottfredson.com, and we'll provide a link to it on our show notes, as well as to his social sites on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. As I alluded at the onset of this podcast, this is like definitely within the sweet spot that I love. I mean, this is the topic that I love, being a coach and a career changer. So this is definitely the sweet spot. So I hope you enjoy what this discussion had to offer as much as I did. Do let us know on our podcast site, successinsightpodcast.com, or a comment on our Facebook page, LinkedIn, or YouTube page. And you can also listen to this podcast on the major podcast platforms, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. And remember, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, be safe, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Success Insight Podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.